Day of the ANC's National Policy Conference. Well, it's still a bit quiet here at Nasrec, but we're expecting delegates to start arriving in the next couple of hours or so. But let's chat now to my Minister of Communications, Ayanda Dlodlo, who is also an ANC NEC member as well as the head of the Legislature and Governance Subcommittee. Thank you very much for your time this morning. You know, Minister, we are not allowed to enter these commissions where this robust debate takes place. We get the media briefing you know, what goes on in these committees, you know, these commissions, the robust debate perhaps that happens with regard to quite a number of issues.
Okay, what you have there is the chairperson that chairs the session, but sets the tone as well for the conversation and the discussions based on inputs that have come from provinces and also from the original paper, but also inputs that have come from the sectors in which the various subcommittees operate. For instance, if you have the legislature and governance, we will have input from other sectors, the universities and stuff like that. And then you will have from the provinces. So we set the scene on the basis of what we see in the documentation, but also from what comes from sectors and provinces. Then you have your rapporteurs who are listening vigorously to ensure that when they report back at plenary, they report exactly what has gone on and the discussions that have ensued. Then you have the scribes who take all the notes with pens burning and stuff like that, and they're the ones that are responsible to ensure that everything that has been said is captured, and then that's what we take to plenary.
But I could quite imagine, you know, you're not always going to get delegates who are agreeing on everything, in particular in a climate where the country is facing its own challenges, the African National Congress is facing its own challenges. So perhaps, you know, in dealing with that kind of robust debate to ensure that solutions do emerge at the end of the day.
Well, we are not a homogeneous group. We have our own views. People have different takes on matters. Other people are more advanced than others in terms of thinking on issues. They're looking forward. As some of us are stuck in a time warp. But those conversations are discussions that aim to take the ANC forward. But also remember that the ANC is a governing body. So it aims to take governance forward to ensure that service delivery and the discourse and public discourse on matters that affect our people are actually taken into account. And so you will find people with divergent views. The ideology is one, but the views on the very ideology would be different. But also in terms of how people manage things, we all read different types of books that inform our thinking, inform our opinions and views on matters. So that too has an effect. We also interact with different members of society, we also interact with different communities who have different needs. That too informs our thinking as individuals and as collectives in most cases.
I did ask a bit earlier on Natim Tetwa, who will be presenting on strategy and tactics. You know, the challenges that the ANC and the country faces today are not similar to the ones that, you know, the country, including the governing party, have faced. How do you take that into account in speaking to these communities? Of course, if you look at some of the research that we've done, if you look at service delivery protests, for example, they've become more violent. You've got communities that have become more agitated by the pace of service delivery, for example.
But you know, if you come from a society that has always been violent, this is what you will experience. Violence breeds violence, and this is something that we need to work on in society. Apartheid was a very violent system, and as such, it has bred this violent nature of who we are as South Africans. Violent in the way that we talk, violent in the way that we protest, violent in the way that we do things, violent in the way that we treat women, for that matter, violent in the way that we treat journalists, but also violent in the way that journalists sometimes deal with members of society, in the way that they use their pen as a source of violence. So there is violence all over. And I think as South Africans, we need to reflect on that. Is that the society we want our children to inherit? Is that the type of culture and tradition that we want our children to inherit? So I think it's unfortunate that people will protest about a 2-kilometer road that has potholes and decide to burn a library. The correlation just doesn't match up. But unfortunately, fortunately, in ANC meetings like this one, you will not find us throwing chairs at one another. We might differ and differ vigorously on matters, but we will still maintain the decorum and the value system of the ANC, which is that of tolerance. As you would see, ANC people don't attack journalists. As you would see, we treat people with dignity all the time. But you will see from what comes out of here when we actually wrap up that we would have applied our minds to issues that affect our people.
But just on that point as well, President Jacob Zuma did also mention and say the ANC itself needs to dissect why people are responding or communicating with the ANC in this violent manner. And as head of legislature and governance, I think that's one of the issues perhaps that needs to be spoken to as to why people have now decided to resort to this kind of violence. And in the manner in which they speak, it's now speaking with violent action instead of addressing it by word of mouth, for example.
Like I said, Chriselda, it's not only on protests that you find this type of violence. You find the type of violence in relations between two individuals that are in love. And the way that they deal with one another becomes so vicious to a point where the female partner, in most instances, is the one that gets killed. Although in some instances, so it's just not about the ANC and governance, it's just about society and the stance that society is taking towards each other.
All right. Unfortunately, that's all we have time for there. Thank you very much, ANC NEC member Ayanda Dlodlo, as well as the head of legislature and governance as well. Certainly some of the issues that the ANC itself will dissect about, I guess, the manner in which some of these issues, in particular relating, I guess, to service delivery protests and how people respond to some of the challenges that they're facing in their various communities.